All right, let's bring it on. So the world wants to know, how long did it take you to reach fluency in Spanish, and how do you go about this? Love and light, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of a podcast, the greatest virtual happy hour in the world. I am your host, Kai Primo, and I'm joined by my super co-host and fiance extraordinaire, Jesse Wright. If you're new to the channel and you're not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing and also find a podcast, and those links will be in the description below. Our guest today is Chris Reidy. He is the founder and program director at Tico Lingo, a Spanish immersion school in Costa Rica. He's a local resident, having lived there for nearly a decade, and he's here to talk to us about entrepreneurship in a foreign country. So, Chris, we're very excited to have you today. Thanks for taking the time to join us in the podcast.
Super happy to be here, guys. It's awesome to reconnect with Jesse. He's an alumni of the school. It's really, really cool to be a part of this, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Let's bring it on.
All right, let's bring it on. So the world wants to know, how long did it take you to reach fluency in Spanish, and how do you go about this?
Nice. Good question. Bueno. So I use Spanish. I use it for everything now these days. My accountant is all in Spanish. Any lawyers, all my Spanish professors. We place our students with local homestay families. They all speak Spanish, only Spanish. For me, fluency is hard to define. Everybody has their own take on it, but generally it means being able to hold general conversations, maintain a friendship or relationship, like strictly in that foreign language. For me to get there in Spanish, it was probably like 6 months, maybe 9 months of just being here full time, living, speaking as much Spanish as I could every single day. When I got here, I spoke so little that I would study alone, learn 15, 20 new words and verbs, and then go out into the wild, out into the streets of Alajuela, Costa Rica, and just speak and speak and speak and speak. For about 6 months, I was pretty confident introducing myself, holding basic conversations. And then surely after about a year, I could hold relationships in Spanish pretty easily.
Wow, under a year, that's not that long. You're basically self-studying, and then it's all practice is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, the idea of Tico Lingo was to kind of share with the world how I learned Spanish. I actually failed high school Spanish. I was a terrible student. And when I got to university, they offered me the option of taking 3 hours of Spanish or 10 hours of history. I went with history to avoid Spanish because my high school experience was terrible. So when I got here, it was a newfound appreciation for the language, an appreciation that I don't think I had ever really experienced. And that was the ability to communicate with new people that I always thought I'd never communicate with, and just throwing myself in it and having no shame. You're going to sound dumb. I probably still sound dumb today to a lot of native speakers. So really getting over that as soon as possible, and just getting yourself in front of a native speaker and as many native speakers as you possibly can. It's scary and terrifying at first, but you do it every day with 5 different people a day for a week or two, you begin to get used to the weird looks you'll get, like what is he saying? Those kind of looks. And yeah, poco a poco, one day at a time, un día a la vez. You'll learn new words. You'll meet interesting new people. Your motivation to continue to study and learn increases with every new person that you meet because they're interested in you. They're like, why are you here? What are you doing? Why are you trying to speak Spanish? Like, what is this crazy gringo, redheaded, blue-eyed freak doing here? It's doable in the US, but it's going to take a lot longer. For me, what really, really worked was just throwing myself at it, just 100%, just going for it.
What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that the K through 12 and the school system makes when it comes to learning Spanish? As you mentioned before, I also attended the school, and there are people there that took Spanish between K through 12 and in college. And I remember a few examples. And when they were taking their intake exam, they weren't even at an intermediate level after 16 years. They were still at a beginner level. What is the academic schools doing wrong that you're doing correctly?
That's awesome. Good question. I think generally the public school, even the private schools, they're looking at it as like a get the right answer. It's a fill in the blank, a multiple choice. It's almost like a math class. Select the right verb conjugation, the right pronoun. And yeah, those are fundamental aspects of the language, but if it doesn't really help you speak it, and I think the joy of learning a language is being able to speak it, being able to meet new people in that language, express yourself in different ways because you're learning a new way to think and to speak. As soon as you minimize that down to a fill in the blank and a multiple choice exam, and you create an atmosphere where so little Spanish is being spoken, and you're only really exposed to this Spanish environment, if you can even call that, for 50 minutes, very little is going to sink in. It doesn't really inspire students to learn it, and definitely didn't inspire me. Reflecting on my high school experience, there was 25 gringos in a classroom together for 50 minutes. It's hard to do to really inspire people to say, hey, look, this is useful and you can meet new people. Generally exposing them more to listening exercises, to speaking exercises, to more native speakers. The United States is flush with native Spanish speakers. There's more Spanish speakers there than there are in Spain now. More exposure to native Spanish speaking population would help tremendously with inspiring students to actually care about the language.
Do you recommend language learning apps like Duolingo? Or what I'm hearing is you just have to speak. You just have to be around it and speak it, because being super conversational and pretty fluent in less than a year is pretty impressive.
Well, thank you for the props there.
I think Lingo. Let's
yeah,
go.
That's right. I don't think there's anything wrong with picking up a language app. There's tons of them out there now. Duolingo is the most popular, most well known. It does a decent job of just exposing you to really principal grammar, like the very basic ideas of masculine, feminine pronouns, verb conjugations, things that don't typically exist in English. In English, we have I am, he is, right? There is some conjugation with some verbs, but not to the extent that Spanish has. The apps do a decent job exposing very fresh beginners to that kind of grammar. Eventually, to break into an intermediate level, you're going to have to speak it to a human being and not to a robot or to an app or to a computer.
Do you have any hacks to learning a second language? You got like Timothy Ferris, he wrote a book and he reverse engineered learning a second language, which I think is complete bullshit. As someone that actually is fluent in a second language, do you have any hacks that actually do work? Or is it bullshit?
Those hacks will be exposed to you in a written form. Right? And I know Tim Ferriss's stuff. He references, I want to say, a Turkish man, Michael something. I don't remember his name, but I've seen his work and I've seen his kind of breakdown the language. If I have a student here who's really struggling and needs a native English speaker to share their experience, I'll jump in and do a gringo hack class, if that makes sense. I don't know, Jesse, if I would call it straight bullshit, but for me and for my students, what I see them getting inspired by is the interaction they have in Spanish with human beings face to face. As humans, we want to connect with other humans. We're social creatures. The thrill of being able to do that in a language that's completely new to you, where you're trying out new ways of saying things, you're learning new ways of saying things, hearing other people say things differently, and then replicating that, and then seeing immediate feedback on the faces of people in front of you, maybe having a beer. That's where the inspiration comes from, and the actual learning comes from, the motivation, the excitement comes from. I personally don't get that excited about reading Tim Ferriss's hack or some of the other gringo reverse engineering hacks that exist. I'm sure it works for somebody, but for my students, not necessarily, not typically, no, and nor for myself.
I feel like just like with anything, you can go to school and get your degree and have your fundamentals. But when you go and get a job, most of how you're going to know what to do in your job or how to excel and perform is basically on the job. Being on the job, you get to understand how to be efficient, how to be whatever, and you just do that on the spot. Same with the language. You have to speak it. You just have to talk to people. Do your studies, learn some vocabulary, but you have to just talk to people. As let's say I enrolled in your school, what does the curriculum look like? What would be a day in the life of the student?
Definitely. And actually, Kai, before I jump into the day-to-day life of a student, just want to touch on something you mentioned there about learning things on the job. I worked in the tech world, and the tech world has all this lingo and these phrases and ways of writing emails and all these quirky little things that the tech world has. Even as a native English speaker, I'm learning different ways of saying things, different ways of communicating an idea. Learning on the job idea is what we do here. So really the day-to-day is that, like, people are living in a local homestay family. They're waking up 6:30, 7 a.m. with the sun. The sun's up 5:30, 5:45 here. They're sitting down having breakfast with their homestay family who speaks no English, and they're sharing a meal with them. They're drinking coffee. They're having a local dish, gallo pinto, and they're applying everything that they learned the day prior or the background in Spanish that they may have coming here. They're immediately thrown into speaking with a native speaker, right? After breakfast, they'll walk to class. They're in a group Spanish class with no more than 5 other classmates. It's a super small setting. We all sit around the same table, try to create a team environment, a group atmosphere where we're all in the struggle together. And they're in that classroom for 4 hours. There's a lot of time to get into kind of a more personalized class, focusing on the areas that students are most struggling with or have questions about. And then after class, students have the option of signing up for some cool cultural activities. So we do dance class, lots of merengue and bachata, cumbia, a lot of salsa. We're doing cooking classes. So students are learning how to do empanadas and gallo pinto, and chifrijo is a really popular dish in Costa Rica. We also do yoga. We've got a lot of yogis who come down to Costa Rica, or a lot of people who've never done yoga who are like, you know what, I need to rest my brain after that 4-hour session and just like relax out, namaste. And and after cultural activities, some students have even more class. They'll sign up for private classes, one-on-one sessions, where it's even more opportunity to really dial in and focus exactly on the points that are causing you the most pain. But typically in the afternoon, the very first day of class, we'll do a walking tour of the whole city so students know some cool lunch spots, places to study, places to get coffee, some local museums to check out. We encourage students to go explore the city. It's a really walkable city. It's really non-touristic, so nobody's really speaking English. We'll give little assignments. We call them little like immersion assignments. We'll ask students to go get the price of a 2x4 at 3 different hardware stores, right? Or we'll ask students to make a video of themselves speaking Spanish with a woman at the Central Market and buy her a cup of coffee, or various activities, kind of scavenger hunt, encouraging students to get out into the local community, into the local city to use what they're learning in class with native speakers. Dinner with the homestay is typically served around 6:30. And Thursdays, I don't know if you remember, Jesse, you remember we do the intercambio activity. So we invite locals over who are learning English to help us practice our Spanish. We help them with their English. We might have a round of beers. We make some popcorn. It's kind of a social event for the community, and it's grown and grown and grown over the years to an extent where we do 1 week, we'll do it at the school, and another week we support a local business. It's kind of a bar, restaurant vibe, more of a social atmosphere. Weekends, students can sign up for tours. So we're going out to the beaches, the rainforest. We're doing whitewater rafting. We're going out to the volcano. A few volcanoes here in Costa Rica. The most famous is Volcan Arenal. We do a few tours out there. But generally, we keep people in the city, and we're really pushing them to speak with as many native speakers as possible and get as much FaceTime with locals here in Costa Rica. Ticos, los ticos.
If you had to put a percentage on it, how much do you think a student learns at the school versus learns at the homestay with the host family? I used to buy a bottle of wine or some beer and drink with my host dad for 6 or 8 hours every single day, minus the weekends when we would travel around Costa Rica. If you had to put a percentage on it, or at least talk about the homestay aspect with the host family.
I was a musician. I played the bass and the guitar in various bands back in Chicago. And I see it as like, okay, I have my guitar class where I'm learning new scales, new chords. But when I'm on stage or I'm performing or I'm practicing with my band, that's when I can experiment with those scales, with those chords, with those different structures of a song. The homestay is really where you're getting the opportunity to experiment with those new resources, those new tools. So really the classroom for me is like we're filling up your toolbox. The homestay is like go out there and apply those tools. You get exposed to it in the classroom. And then once you start using it and you use that word or that verb conjugation 3, 4, 5 times face to face over a bottle of wine with your homestay family, that's when that tool, you're never going to forget how to use that tool. How do you use a screwdriver? I don't know. Go out into the field. You're going to find 3 or 4 ways how to use it. They definitely are supplemental. One without the other wouldn't be the same experience. Together, they make something really, really special.
Let's talk about how you started it. You're from Chicago, and then you came to Costa Rica. Talk about your story real quick of being from the States and then finding your home in Costa Rica. How did that happen?
So I went to school in Ohio at Ohio University, go Bobcats, and I moved back to the city of Chicago. And I lived in a hipster, not the fanciest kind of area, but it was like up and coming artsy hipster area. And I moved in with a friend right next to a family, a Mexican family with 3 generations under one roof. I was just amazed and embarrassed that I had to communicate with my neighbors through an 8-year-old who spoke Spanish and English. And I was like, this is so embarrassing. I missed out on so much free education. I could have learned Spanish and I didn't. And here I am saying hello to the senora, the grandma next door who's in her 60s, like asking if I can help out with groceries or if I can help out in her garden. And I have to do this through an 8-year-old. And I was like, this is so embarrassing. So I started to have an interest in Spanish, and I was working in tech. I was playing in a punk rock band. I was conflicted in life, and I had never left the United States before. A long story short, one of my father's best friends in the world married a Costa Rican woman in 93. And his wife, Hilda Paniagua, is a saint of a woman, a really angel, a huge angel, just the impact of my life as I grew up. And unfortunately, her husband, Chuck, my father's best friend in the world, passed away from leukemia in 2014. And Chuck was an awesome guy, used to come to my shows, used to visit me in Chicago. But Hilda came up for the funeral and was very insistent on me coming to Costa Rica. And quit that job. We know you're not happy there. It's time for you to leave the United States and see some other part of the world. So I said, okay, I'm going to take you up on that. 6 months later, I was down here. I went from living in this little apartment in the winter of Chicago with snow and ice and gray skies to living on the side of a coffee plantation where it was the most lush place, so green and so beautiful. I fell in love with Costa Rica on the onset. And I taught a little bit of English here, but really what happened was instead of falling in love with teaching English, I fell in love with learning Spanish. And the dream of Tico Lingo slowly developed.
Man, that's a really heartfelt story. Love and light to Chuck and your dad's best friend. It's amazing how the universe steers us to whatever direction, and out of nowhere, your passion was birthed through those sequence of events. What were the steps that you needed to take to build Tico Lingo in Costa Rica?
My initial plan and what Hilda sold me on was come move in with me, go teach English, go volunteer teaching English. If you like it enough, you can maybe go do it out in Southeast Asia. And that was kind of my plan. I was like, okay. And I had some friends teaching in Korea, another friend in China. And I said, okay, well, maybe. So I got started teaching English at, not really, I was volunteering. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I was like, should I get the TEFL? It's a $1,200 investment. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I'm in different English schools. I was in Grecia. I was in Heredia. I was in Alajuela, San Jose. All different types of schools, private schools, universities, public schools with like 35 kids in a room. I just loved the experience. I loved being in a school and not being in front of a computer. Over time, I would see my students get better at English and get more excited to see me and tell new stories and use new words with me that they had learned the night or two before. And I was like, this is cool. This is actually really cool. And these kids are getting better, and English is going to change their lives. Eventually, I got hired. I got like a paid job at an English school in Alajuela. And the owner of the school, 3 weeks after I was there, finally looked at my resume that I gave him. And he's like, hey, it looks like you got some marketing experience. Looks like you got some web design experience. And I was like, yeah, you did actually look at my resume. He's like, I finally looked at it. And so he came up with this idea of starting a Spanish school. And he pitches me this idea. And about a week later, I was 40% owner of a Spanish school in Costa Rica. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I started just seeing it as an opportunity for me to stay longer. And so I put together a website with the help of a friend of mine who's a designer. And I sold the program. And it was like, oh my God, I sold this Felix. Yeah, Felix. It was a 1-month program for a 25-year-old guy from Germany. And Felix was writing me emails. I'm so excited to meet other travelers. This is going to be so fun to meet people who are learning Spanish. And I was like, oh man, he's the only one. Okay. So I have a panic. Oh my God. I call up friends and family. Someone come down, be Felix's partner. So I find Brittany, friend of a friend of a friend, long chain of connection. And she comes down half off her program. And Felix had an okay time, but at the end of the program, he came to me and he was like, you know what, man, your partner is terrible. He's worthless. And if you weren't here, I would have asked for my money back like day 3. And I was like, geez, he's like, you don't need him. You should go do it on your own. I turned to Brittany and she's like, just go do it on your own. You can do this on your own. I was terrified at the time, right? So the benefit of partnering with someone is he had an English school. He had chairs and tables and whiteboards and all the resources and printers and internet and everything you need to start. And so I didn't have to invest any sort of financial investments. So I was presented with this and I was like, Felix, for real? Like, you really believe, like, he was like, oh yeah, man, your partner is garbage. And I'm not going to name names. And this is a very light version. Once I'm up there visiting you guys, I'll give you the raw, dirty version. But really, Felix
over some hazies.
That's right. And so I began the search. And probably 3 weeks later, I found a house. And I talked to the landlord. I said, hey, we want to teach some Spanish here, maybe little English classes. And he loved it. He had done a program in Wisconsin as like a high schooler. And this guy was like in his 50s, 60s. And so the landlord was like, green light all the way. Just let me know when you want to move in. And I was like, oh, geez. And by that time, I had blown through all my savings. I had no money saved up. I put together a business plan. I'm pitching it to uncles. My mom thinks I'm out of my mind. My dad's like, you're crazy. There's no way. And I'm like, geez, what am I going to do? And should I start pitching to friends? And so a week later, my dad finally calls me back after my initial pitch. And he's like, all right, if you want to go for this, you should go for it. I want to say the loan was $5,000. He said it was a 10% APY. He wanted $5,500 by the end of the year. He's like, this isn't free. You got to go for this, but know that it's not free and I need you to make some money back. So I said, okay, thank you. I moved into that house and I quickly learned that I was going to be sleeping on a yoga mat and eating rice and beans for like 3 months straight. Some dire times, but those months really built me and built my love for being an entrepreneur, my connection to this business. This thing is my child. It was nothing. And now it's something, as you just looked up and doing your little Googling, right?
Yeah, what would you say is the most difficult aspect of being a business owner or an entrepreneur abroad. Most Americans would have a hard time, even in the US, trying to start a business. Taxes, getting an LLC or S Corp or corporation set up. And the whole marketing aspect, now marketing in a foreign country, there's a lot of paperwork and red tape. What is it like being an entrepreneur abroad, and how challenging is that?
There's so many new systems that you have to learn, right? So you guys in Puerto Rico and others back in the US, like we know how to pay our electric bill. We know that when we rent a house, it's probably going to come with a fridge and an oven. When I rented that first home here, no oven, no microwave, no refrigerator, no laundry machine, zero appliance there. I was like, really? Like, this is crazy. And so I had to buy my first refrigerator ever in my life in Costa Rica. And how do I do that? Right? How do I even shop that? Where do I even go? Everything from buying appliances to getting set up with internet is difficult. I was a brand new entrepreneur, so I didn't know necessarily how to hire people, how to negotiate with them. A lot of cultural differences here as to how you negotiate wages, how you negotiate work. I learned pretty quickly that people are ready to take advantage of you. People lie to you, they cheat. Generally, culturally, people are always arriving late. It's really difficult to rely on people. But I think that comes with the territory, is just being an entrepreneur. You're on your own. I had such an immense social life in Chicago. I was playing in bands. Every other night there was a show or some sort of event to attend. Just escaping that really allowed me to fully throw myself at Tico Lingo. But trying to tap into difficulties, being alone, having no social peer, even friends and entrepreneur friends back in Chicago or throughout the United States who I'd met along the way, they couldn't really relate to a lot of the things. Yes, they could help with marketing and they could help with some design ideas, but the day-to-day like desperation of being here and being alone, having a few friends, but nobody really in my shoes. I was just very alone. Experiencing that loneliness, I think, is a huge, huge difficulty because you are battling such an uphill battle. You're going uphill everything. You're making me get all sentimental here. We're reflecting on like the early days of Tico Lingo. It's, 7 years ago now. Still the job I've held the longest in my entire life. And it's changed every year. There's something new to explore.
It's amazing. And the learning curve is constant. You're creating experiences. And so that's a unique production, really. And someone who had to learn the language himself, that was probably one of your biggest tools, is that you had to learn this language and you're just imparting that. You were a bunch of steps ahead of your new students and just capitalizing on being about 10 steps ahead. It's like, okay, here's what I did to like get here.
Yeah, having that experience that I had was super fun to share with those first 50 students. Our first year, we probably saw 10 students, maybe 15. And so each one of those, it's like they became friends of mine. I'm still in touch with them today. Actually, one of them ended up moving to Costa Rica and starting his own business. Having the ability to really guide them, to show them how cool it is and how motivated I was to learn it and what I could do with it. It was super fun to share that. But also knowing that the seamlessness of the booking experience, of the airport pickup, of the lodging, the communication, the transparency, the high level of professionalism was something really, really important to me to provide to students. It was something I challenged with. I don't think there are many other businesses in Costa Rica that take that so seriously. I have to deal with it all the time on a day-to-day basis whenever I interact with other businesses here. It's like, okay, are you at my level? Let's take this super professionally. And it's hard to find that. It's really hard to find that here.
You're in the language category and you're also in hospitality, because you take care of their accommodation, the family. You have to have built relationships with local families in Costa Rica who's willing and open to take in students. This is just a really intricate kind of maze. You started in 2015 and it's 2023 now. You've come along so far, and your school is one of the top ones in Costa Rica. That's just really crazy cool to stick it out that long. Did you have moments where you were like, I want to give up?
Yeah. So I grew And it was exciting. I was still living at the school, sleeping here, bathing here. I had no privacy. I had no space to myself. Students were here all day. I had professors coming in at 7:30, leaving at 5 p.m. And so I finally got to a point where I could hire an assistant. And she was really fun. She was really cool. She connected always with the students and was an awesome human being. And not the one that you met, Jesse, the one prior to her.
So not
Yeah.
Janira.
No, Janira, she's listening. Like, I love her so much. She's awesome.
Yeah, Janira does listen to the podcast, by the way.
She does.
Just ahead.
Oh,
she does. Yeah.
That's awesome. Drinking hazies, I'm sure. So my first assistant stole from the school, stole from me personally, and lied to me and lied to everyone about it. I kind of accepted that. I didn't know it was a lie for months. 3 months after the event, I kind of catch her with my things and my property, and I'm like, what are you doing? That's crazy. And I had to go through this crisis of like, do I forgive this person or do I fire them? And then how does that look? And what is the firing process? And at that point, that person, she was a friend of mine. She was one of my only friends who understood the experience of hosting students and welcoming them and getting to know them and seeing their growth over 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And then you get to work on Monday and they're gone. So kind of like an emotional roller coaster sometimes. And she was there with me on those roller coasters. And so I forgave her. I said, like, I'm going to let this one go. I'm going to need the items back. But if I ever see it happen again, I can't forgive you twice. Then 2 or 3 months later, she stole again. And it was like heartbreaking, just absolutely heartbreaking. I still look at it today as like the moment where I almost lost faith in everything. And I almost just threw in the towel because it was like, wow, who is going to be the next person to lie to me, to steal from me? I had given her a lot. I gave her a great salary and I taught her English. I bought her a ukulele and we would play music together. And it's like, wow, a trusted friend just stabbed me in the back. That moment of like, wow, I actually have some connection with a human being here that's super deep and it's growing. And then boom, knife in the back. I'm lonely again. And I was wrong. That was brutal. 2 or 3 days later, I went to the store that Janira was working at. And I was like, I need your help. I need your help so bad. And she had come to the intercambios to practice her English. She was getting really good at English. I saw that she was kind of an admin person, a hospitality, a very happy, cheery human being. And I was like, come work for me, please save me. And she came, thank God. So Tico Lingo has been this ride up and down. It's learning how to ride the ride. There's nothing more in my life I've ever learned from more. Like this thing has taught me so much. I've grown so much as a human being. When I reflect on that experience that I went through with my first assistant, I really see it now as this course that I had to go through, this high level life course. Because not only did I get stabbed in the back, I got stabbed in the back and again because she sued me. And I had to go sit in front of a judge and she won the case. And I'm walking out of the courthouse on the steps of her after paying her a good amount of money to settle the case. Just astounded by someone who had helped so much and who I'd cared for and who I'd considered a friend to do something like that to me. So not only did I lose a friend, I lost a lot of money. I learned so much about myself and about the court system in Costa Rica and about how business owners are really susceptible to angry employees. Their ass is always in the air, right? And if anything happens, they're the first ones to get sued. The state always leans on the employee more than the employer.
So what was she suing for unlawful termination or?
Exactly. Unlawful termination. I had text messages and everything, and I had testimony of my professors who had actually seen her steal things, but it wasn't enough. They needed cameras, they needed proper written documentation of her accepting guilt and declaring that she had stolen. I didn't have any of that. I learned the hard way, and I'm just glad I didn't bail. I'm glad it didn't put the business under, and I'm glad I had the nerve to just keep the fight alive because Because, yeah, I was close. It almost took me down emotionally.
What do you think are some of the key attributes to be a successful entrepreneur? You see a lot of people like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, but everyone sees these people after the fact when they're successful. A lot of people have this fairy tale of being an entrepreneur, but like you're saying, you were literally sleeping in the school, eating ramen. Well, maybe not even ramen. You might have been eating
Gallo Pinto.
Gallo Pinto. Yeah. What are some of the key attributes? Because being an entrepreneur is certainly not easy. It reminds me of the expression. What do you call someone that quit a 40-hour work week to work 80 hours? It's called an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's hard, man. That's hard because there's so many different types of entrepreneurs, and there's the whole digital nomad thing. My girlfriend's an architect here, and she's an independent contractor. I feel like an entrepreneur is someone who is employing people, who's trying to make some sort of social difference, whether that's in their community, with their clients, with their employees. An entrepreneur just needs to have full passion and belief in what they're offering. Prior to Tico Lingo, I had some experience in sales. I had sold women's jewelry and women's boots, and I had done marketing for Microsoft Power BI cloud storage. And none of those things I believed in to an extent to really throw myself in and dedicate my life to. The experience that I went through when I got here and realizing how powerful Spanish is and how it can change people's lives. It changed my life, no doubt. I was like, wow, I want to share that with the world. Believing in what you're offering and having a desire to work with people and to grow with people and make the decisions about what's best for you and your business and your employees and your customers. People think they want that responsibility. They want to make those decisions, but when it comes down to it, it's a heavy burden to carry to make the final call. You have to really, really, really want it. And you have to be willing to sleep on a yoga mat and eat rice and beans and black coffee for months and months and just believe in it the whole way through. I think being an immigrant here kind of helped me because it was do or die. If I didn't make it, I was going to abandon my lease, abandon any sort of relationships that I had here at the time, and literally book the next flight back to O'Hare, Chicago. I had $600 cash in an envelope in the back room. That was basically my oh shit money. If it was just not going to work and there was no sales anywhere near coming, nothing was going to hit, I had no leads, no students anywhere, then I was ready to bail. That would have meant losing everything to an extent where I'm like completely losing this world, this country, everything, the entire year that I had spent here. I would burn so many bridges doing that. There was a lot on the line. To some degree, I think that helped me. It motivated me. Entrepreneurs can be motivated in lots of different ways, but I think fundamentally they need a belief in what they're offering and a belief in themselves that they'll make that venture successful.
When you were on the thin veneer of, okay, I'm ready to throw in the towel after that hurdle that you had to go through, was these relationships and the people that you'd employed, the students and the families, and then the belief in this language, is that what kind of kept you from throwing in the towel?
Yeah, after...
What was that like? I can only imagine like coming home from the courtroom and then all of a sudden you're
actually,
like,
Kai,
okay, like I'm done.
That whole thing happened on a Thursday. Thursday is our intercambio day. I walked out of that courthouse with that ex-assistant and was just like, don't ever talk to me again. I went right back to the school and we were having a party. It was an intercambio like party. There was beer served, there was food. It was the middle of the summer too, a busy season. We probably had 15, 20 students at Tico Lingo. I walk in the front door and I'm just like, wow, so much energy, so much love, so much passion, so much happiness and laughter at Tico Lingo, and just seeing my students just like loving it. I was like, man, I got to keep going. I got to keep this alive. What else do I have to go back to? I'm going to throw in the towel and go get an office job back in Chicago.
After living in Costa Rica for nearly a decade, do you ever see yourself moving back to the U.S.? Is there things that you miss about the United States, or do you prefer living the pura vida lifestyle?
Definitely. There's plenty of things I miss. I miss addresses, right? Jesse, I don't know if you remember, but we do not have addresses here. My official government address is 50 meters south of the gymnasium of the local grade school in Barrio Fatima. I can't tell you the amount of headaches I've had to incur because people can't find the street or the house or the building that they need to get to. I think culturally, Chicago is like blues music and jazz, and the Chicago Cubs are a ton of fun to see. But I'm pretty rooted here. I like Costa Rica a lot. I've got a girlfriend that I love so dearly, 5.5 years now. We just bought a piece of property here. She's an architect, and we're designing this 3-story building, and it will be the first of many. I'm excited about my future in Costa Rica. The US isn't too far. I'm going up to see my mom, and I'll be up there for a week, and I get my little hit of the US. Like, hit me with that USA. It's fun to jump on Amazon, get stuff delivered to your house or whatever. Because I drive down those big highways and those empty parking lots and those endless plazas throughout Florida. I'm just like, I got to get out of here. Like, it drives me crazy. So yeah, I'm into the Pura Vida lifestyle, definitely, Jesse, 100%.
Do you think that there's an advantage to being from the United States when it comes to actually running a business in terms of understanding your customer? I also went to a Spanish immersion school in Peru. I had to leave Costa Rica after 3 months because of my visa. I went to Peru for 6 weeks, and I came back to Costa Rica, went back to Tico Lingo. When I was at the school in Peru, it was run by Peruvians, and they just really had no idea how to pick people up, the service. They had no intercambio. Like, every classroom was very separated, so there was no intermingling, so there's no social aspect. When I was at your school, the people that went there were a much different group of travelers than compared to, say, the people at a hostel or the backpacking crowd. It was really cool people that were interested in learning and bettering themselves instead of just going out and getting hammered and partying every night.
Yeah.
But they expect a certain level of service. And I didn't think, at least the school I went to, that they didn't actually understand who they were catering to.
I think it's a huge, huge, huge plus that I come from the US. I know the culture. I know what the American experience is, especially online. I'm a native speaker. I wrote and designed the entire website myself. I built the website. I'm constantly editing the website. So what do? I look at the websites that Americans are using all the time. How does Chase Bank look? How does Amazon look? How does Wells Fargo look? Like, these trusted companies that are taking people's money. Let's build something like that visually so that it develops this sense of trust. I'm also using very American English, using funny, cutesy phrases on the website. The photography is super important. A lot of those skills came from my background of growing up in the United States and being exposed to that. And then, Jesse, as you talked about, like, the experience, I just think about what experience would I want? Like, I wanted to create an experience at Tico Lingo that was as different as possible than my experience in high school, which was very competitive. No one wanted to share exercises or homeworks or answers together. It was very isolating. I wanted to create this atmosphere that was very team effort, group effort. We're all in this struggle together. We're all here with the same mission, the same goal. Because of that, over the years, it attracts a type of person who's taking Spanish learning very seriously. They're not here, like you mentioned, to go out and get drunk and party. They're not backpackers typically. They're more academics, teachers, high school kids and college kids. But a lot of times, especially these months in February and March, we see a lot of older students in their 50s, 60s, 70s. The oldest student I had was 91. And he came down here with his 65-year-old daughter. Right? So Spanish has kind of been a bucket list for people. They see our website, they see our service, they see our reviews. They see every single point that they touch our business as like this hyper professional, transparent, to the standard that they would get if they were talking to Chase Bank. Well, maybe not Chase Bank, but another high level professional, trusted organization in the United States. So they see that and they say, okay, we're coming down, we're going to Tico Lingo. And once they're here, they really feel that and they see that support and they see that mutual desire to speak and learn Spanish amongst all the staff, all the students here. And it's just a fun atmosphere. Kai, when are you coming over? I'll get a hazy girl. I'll get some beers brewing.
You gotta you gotta get a couple kegs of those things brewing.
Oh yeah, man.
We'll go through a keg a night, huh?
We have beer
I,
on
I,
tap at the school, and yeah, every intercambio, I'm like giving out free pints of beer, and it's
holy crap! Why
yeah,
aren't we there, huh?
yeah.
By the way, I feel like my Spanish gets better, or even my Boston accent. Like every time I'm drinking,
Oh yeah,
all the walls are off, and I
ah,
feel like I speak better Spanish, or my Boston accent comes out hardcore. It's these hazies, man.
yeah. But it's like instead of
But
criticizing people for making a mistake, it's like, hey, let's encourage them to speak more and experiment with the language. Because until you're creating the language for yourself instead of writing or copying things off of a board or filling in the blank, selecting the right verb on your Duolingo app, until you're generating the language yourself, are you really going to feel excited? Are you really going to secure that language, implant it, make it this concrete thing that you use every single day? We're always encouraging people to speak Spanish. I'm speaking Spanish with students and professors, and we're playing Spanish speaking music. Cumbia, Simba Musical is my favorite band in the world. My girlfriend's going to hear that. She's going to laugh her ass off. It's my favorite band ever. Check them out. Old school cumbia vibes. But yes, tiene que llegar aquí, Kai. Vamos a hablar mucho español, pura vida, todo pura vida.
let's go. Ya vamos a pronto.
Eso. Y tomamos unas birras. Tomamos unas birras,
Yeah.
Mai.
Sí. Pero una pregunta, una otra pregunta.
Dígame.
How do you price yourself? And how do you compete with other schools? Because I think your pricing is quite competitive. How did you architect this whole thing from pricing and the homestays and the pricing on that?
So really early on, it was cheap. Let's make it as cheap as possible. Gonna scale from 1 to 10. I priced it at like a 1.52. And what that would attract were the Jessies. No, the backpackers, the party people, a lot of people who are like, hey, this is just like the cheapest lodging I could find in the area. I was like, okay, so you don't even care about Spanish classes? They're like, no, not at all. I'm like, oh, geez. Over the years, as we gained more notoriety and we had more online reviews, we bumped that up slowly to a 3 to a 4 out of 10. Right now, out of the top 10 competitors, we're probably like a 6.5, 7. There's some Goliaths here that have been doing this for 30, 35 years that somehow can charge almost double what we charge. I like making it accessible, but also to a point where I can pay professors even more so. And I have teachers who have been teaching with me for 5, 6, 7 years, and I need to give them raises. I want to make sure they're fed. I want to see them grow as individuals and buy cars from themselves, go on vacation, that kind of thing. But also the homestay family. If I can pay them more, that means the students are eating better. Maybe the $2 Chuck wine that Jesse was drinking right back in 2018 or 19, and maybe that's a $10 bottle these days because they can afford it, right? I think we'll always aim for that range. I don't want to be top tier, super mega expensive, but I don't want to be the bottom of the barrel either, because a lot of people would doubt. They would be like, this isn't even real. Like, how could this be this cheap? They wouldn't even believe it.
We were talking about hacks before, but that is probably a traveling hack, which is if you want to save some cash, get a homestay at a Spanish immersion school. Actually, in Peru, it was cheaper to stay at the homestay with 2 meals a day in my own room than to get a dorm room in Cusco, which Cusco is fairly expensive. But it was probably less than half the price. And even Anita, like when I was at the school, Anita, a girl from Switzerland, she was like, yeah, I go to the intercambios because it's a way to meet people. And if you stay at a host family, it's cheaper than staying at a hotel.
Absolutely. Obviously, there's a motivation. It's like, hey, it's cheaper. I get meals, I get laundry, private bedroom, and an opportunity to speak more Spanish, right? It's definitely cheaper than going the Airbnb route. And the meals are good, home cooked meals. And our families, they spoil our students. Like, they won't let students wash dishes. It's just like, here's your food. It's like freshly cooked, piping hot dinners, locally cooked, locally sourced ingredients. It's the way to go. And yeah, it could be a traveler's hack. We actually have a rule now because we've learned the hard way that if you're going to book one of our homestay families, you have to sign up for at least 5 hours of private classes so that we know you, we get some FaceTime. I can't recommend the homestay enough. It's awesome. I know all the families. We're up to 35 different families now in our network, and they're all very, very cool.
That's super cool. I just think what you're doing is just amazing for the community. You're a positive addition to the community, and like a thumbs up. Keep doing this. This is awesome.
Like
but back to the
virtual hug here.
abrazos.
Oh my God, you're making me cry.
Hey, yeah. This is probably the most emotional podcast you've probably ever done.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're pulling it out.
Yeah, you guys are.
Let's do one that's not so emotional. Talk about your marketing strategy. In the beginning, you just got that $5,000 loan from your dad.
Yeah.
You came down, started building a website. And then what is now your marketing strategy from then and now?
I have experimented with all different types of marketing, whether it's newsletter or social media or paid ads, just building like a phenomenal website that's really, really SEO friendly and packed full of juicy information, like an awesome blog section. And you just build a website properly, Google picks up on it. So our organic search right now is so powerful. We're the first one in the map pack. So if somebody searches like schools in Costa Rica, we're going to pop up. Our marketing strategy has just been like a phenomenal SEO because it's free and Google's there to help the browser and help the searcher. Our searchers are students. We just want to provide awesome information and make our site as transparent and informational as possible so they can make the right decision. We don't want somebody coming down here if they don't know anything about us or they're confused about information that we posted on the site. The more information that's there, the more visual imagery, videography that's there, like it helps the search engine and it helps the student. Early days, we experimented with really black hat SEO, like link farms and stuff. It's totally nonsense, total nonsense. These days, it's all just organic and it's word of mouth. I've experimented with Google AdWords and Facebook. It's so much work and it's just not worth it for us.
As someone that's used Google AdWords and Facebook, you have to be an expert at it. Like if you're going to dabble in it, you're not going to get the value out of it. All you have to do is Google AdWords. All you have to do is Facebook advertising. And if you try to do it part-time, I don't think you're going to see the results that you want to see, at least in my experience.
Exactly. That's exactly what happens. If I don't have the time to manage a campaign properly, it just falls apart and goes to shit. I don't have enough time to backtrack and look through all the data to see what's working and what isn't. I'm just like, you know what? Here's a cool video, throw it up, see what happens. We're not in e-commerce and we don't do book now. Like you have to speak with a program advisor to see if there's availability, to make sure that they understand what's included in the program, what isn't included. They're always going through an advisor and it makes it hard for us to track what's more effective, the ad campaign or our program advisor who's selling the program, explaining the program, providing his personality so that they can build trust in that relationship and they can ask questions. I found more success in just putting the right person in front of those leads that come through organically than trying to create the most robust, the most beautiful Facebook lead campaign. It'll get them through the door, but someone needs to receive them and they need that personal touch that is Tico Lingo. Word of mouth is by far the most powerful thing. We've had friends of friends and family members and cousins and people like Jesse who have unforgettable experiences and tell people like their beloved esposa, novia, right? And
almost esposa.
almost, soon enough. And so it's like people talk about it. If they have a phenomenal experience, they tell everyone. What's becoming more and more popular is the vlog uploads to YouTube of what's my first experience. I can't tell you how many of my students walk in to our doors on the first day with a GoPro and they're like, hey guys, 6, 7, 8 years ago, not so much, but these days it's 1 in 20, 25 students is documenting their experience. All we have to do is what we do well. It's just like do what we love to do and people are blown away by it. People are like crying. They don't want to leave. If you ask me, Long answer. Short is we do no marketing. We just exist and people talk about us. We update social media here and there, but I don't necessarily consider that marketing. It's like keeping the floors clean. People find us on Google if they need that one extra push, or maybe mom's paying for the program and mom wants to see a few more photos. There's our Instagram, there's our Facebook. It's just there. We don't pay for it. It's organic.
That's excellent. Word of mouth is probably the best marketing since the beginning of marketing. You immediately get the trust because someone's recommending it. I like your take on having the program advisor add that touch, because if a parent is sending their child to an immersion school, they want to know that they can trust it. But man, you guys are crushing it. After your uphill battle and all those the olden days, you're on a downhill where you're literally just on cruise control and you're cruising this scenic route and just enjoying the ride.
It's again, like I said earlier, it's a new challenge. Just like I was facing challenges in 2016, 2017 of like, how do I hire employees and how do I pay people and what's the legal system and how do I get set up with the IRS of Costa Rica and pay taxes? Like those were the challenges then. These days, I've hit that plateau. We're on cruise control. People are talking about us. We're all over the internet. Nat Geo just did a post about us. We're very organically blowing up. And it's like, okay, I don't need to focus on marketing. For me now, it's more like, what does growth look like for us? What does scaling this look like? Is that a second location, a second country? Is that further programming, like offering more tours or a traveling Spanish program or a school in Puerto Rico? Those are the new challenges I'm facing these days. I love the challenge. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. That's what makes it fun.
What was it like navigating through the paperwork, the licenses, IRS, taxes? Do you pay taxes in the US still? What is that like? Is that a bit of a headache in Costa Rica? And how did you figure this out? Did you have a mentor? You just Google stuff?
No.
Who's teaching you how to do this? Yeah.
There's no playbook with that. There's no Google how to, like, top 5 tips. No. So we ran the business illegally for 2 or 3 years. After I got through one of those busier summer months, it was like, okay, wow, this isn't going away. It's time to legitimize this. It wasn't until the first full year where I was like, oh, geez, we just sold a program that doesn't start for 3 months. I guess I'm going to be doing this for 3 more months. This is crazy. Come year 3, I'm like, okay, it's time. And it was terrifying. I was terrified of it. Oh, they're going to find out I've been doing this illegally, or, oh, they're going to say I can't operate in this building, or, oh, they're going to say I need all this expensive fire extinguishers. I was terrified of the unknown, really. And so once I got over that, just like with Spanish, like it's scary at first, but you just dive in. And I would just start talking to accountants. I Google Maps abogado en Heredia, and I found the first guy, and I just walked in and was like, I have this thing and I need to legitimize it. And it's funny, I call them gallinas, which are like chickens, because it reminded me of playing Zelda, where you're on this nonsensical mission where you have to get the sword. And in order to get the sword, you have to go to the doghouse. And to get to the dogs, you have to feed the dogs the chickens. So it's like, okay, I have to go get the chickens to then go to get the dog, to then get to the sword, and then to do this other thing. And it's exactly how the process was here. To get this patente, which is like the ultimate permiso, there was like 17 gallinas I had to do and collect before I could actually get the boss level. So I just created a spreadsheet, and my girlfriend at the time, we would go down the list of gallinas. And of course, to get this one gallina, okay, there was 3 other side quests that I had to do. So I had to go to the Ministry of Health and show them this paperwork and that paperwork, and oh, geez, and then, okay, there's another side mission to the side mission. And so it's just this endless thing. Eventually you get there, and I have the 3 documents hanging in the front reception. Yeah, and it was this crazy thing. I remember I was signing the paperwork, and my mom just happened to call me. She's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, I think I did it. I just defeated the boss. Like I think she's like, I don't know what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, oh mom, I have been on this quest and I you have no idea. Like it has been the quest of
17 gallinas.
yeah, it's been like just a chaotic nightmare and then like every once in a while there's more gallinas that pop up because they change a law or they change some requirement. Is that a Costa Rican thing? No, I think that's just a government thing. I think that happens all over the world and it definitely happens in Chicago. That's just part of the game. I have another student who opened up a gym here and I'm like, wow, man, the amount of gallinas that he had to go through because you have heavy equipment there. He wanted to be open 24/7, so it was super intense zoning laws. The government here just doesn't like gyms at all. Like there's always accidents that happen there, but they love educational institutes, and I had no idea. So we get a tax break, and you were talking about taxes earlier. I definitely still have to file in the U.S. Like every U.S. citizen, wherever they are in the world, they always file with the IRS. Thankfully, I got an awesome CPA. That was another gallina I had to go down. I was like, okay, what's the IRS going to want? I got everything stable here. My taxes are up to date with Tico Lingo. I'm a legitimate operating, Sociedad Anónima is like an LLC. And what about Christopher Reidy? Like, what's his deal? Right? I just like the IRS going to come and threaten my passport someday. I didn't file for like 3 or 4 years. So again, it's just like with Spanish, you just got to dive in, start asking people how to do it.
What happened with that after not filing for 3-4 years? Did you just get sorted out eventually? Like you pay fines and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I had to pay a hefty, not a fine actually. I paid a really professional CPA who had experience with international business and international tax law, and specifically in Costa Rica. And he's like, oh yeah, he had family here. It was just a small world aligning perfectly. Universe just said, okay, Chris, we're going to make this okay for you. He helped me out and just backfiled all the taxes. There were no fines. There was no back taxes at all owed. I just sent him a huge tip because I had this huge chunk of change just set aside. Like, this is IRS money. This is oh shit money. And I went to him and I'm like, dude, is this money just mine now? Like, he's like, yep, that's yours. Do whatever you want. You are up to date. They will never audit you. You are good to go. And I was like, wow, that could have gone a lot uglier. And I'm very grateful for it going the way it did.
That's really cool. That's really awesome. Those things give me extreme anxiety, like taxes and things of that nature.
Oh, yeah.
Expenses and numbers. It just gives me crippling anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
I can't even imagine.
100%.
Yeah. Well, you were talking, realized you're thinking about scaling.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might know your next venture in addition to this would be Tico Negocio.
Yeah.
You can be a consultant.
I've 100%
You can be a consultant for everybody.
Yes. I know the gallinas. I know how to get to the boss level now. Like,
you know the gallinas already, and you can make a website with these little chickens,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like with the sword.
It's like a video game.
We got to get to the boss,
Exactly. That's right.
I could, but I think I might have to start a cerveceria first, a brewery.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, start the craft brewery first, especially in Costa Rica.
Let's go, hazy.
They don't have any. Let's ask a fun question here. Costa Rica is known for its beaches.
Mm-hmm.
You've lived in Costa Rica for almost a decade. What would be the best beach town?
For just tourism, just being a tourist?
Yeah, just straight up tourism. What is the best beach in Costa Rica from a local? For me personally, I went to a bunch of my time off. I preferred Puerto Viejo. Was my favorite. A lot of people say Guanacaste or Manuel Antonio or Antonio Manuel. I always reverse it, but
yeah.
I always thought that was kind of overrated. Like, people say Guanacaste or Uvita.
Dude, you're right. Puerto Viejo is the way to do it. 100%. It's got this very eclectic culture there. It's very Caribbean. I feel like the food's better. And the beach, it's just less developed. So you could rent a little banana bike for $4 a day and just cruise down the Caribbean, head south towards Panama. And you're looking at beaches that are just absolutely mind-blowing. You could go from one to the next. I spend all day just biking, got a bag of beers, just cruising the beaches. And then getting back into Puerto Viejo downtown, if you're into the party thing, it'll go to 4 a.m. Live music. There's the kind of the American gringo scene with live music and like rock bands. And then there's a hardcore Tico scene that's cantinas and salsa and merengue till like 3 a.m. I would be careful. You're in the middle of Central America, so there's going to be a little drug action going on. If you're asking me what the best beach in the world to go to as like a 25 to 35-year-old, maybe 40, is Puerto Viejo is the way to go, 100%.
Yeah, that's what I always thought. Janira, who is a local, I think she said Guanacaste. A lot of the Costa Ricans like Guanacaste. That's what they always said to me. I personally thought Puerto Viejo was better personally.
It's about taste. Like my dad loves Guanacaste because it's so developed, it's so clean, it's so easy to get around. There's a gigantic Costco over there, anything you need, like all the fancier grocery stores and nicer restaurants and everything. But I kind of like off the beaten path a little bit, and Puerto Viejo in the Caribbean. There's a few beaches north of there. Cahuita is absolutely gorgeous. They have a free national park. Going in there, you'll see like 4 or 5 sloths guaranteed, just doing their sloth thing. It's a little harder to get to, but it's worth the trek because it's a little less developed, a little less Americanized.
What are your thoughts on Bitcoin? Do people use Bitcoin in Costa Rica?
I have an employee, a woman from El Salvador. She uses Bitcoin to convert her local Costa Rican colones into Bitcoin and then send it back home through the Chivo wallet, which is interesting. She's indifferent. She's like, yeah, I could have just used Western Union. I guess this is easier, but there's all these people breaking into Chivo wallets, stealing people's identity to gain access to crypto wallets throughout El Salvador. It's so easy for the government to see who's using the Chivo wallet because it's promoted and used by the government. I personally haven't looked that much into Chivo specifically, but I mentioned it to Jesse that we do the intercambio and we have a lot of refugees that come from Nicaragua and a lot of them come from Venezuela. There's a lot of Venezuelans in Costa Rica that use Bitcoin and cherish it with all their heart, just watching their currency inflate to the fucking sky. I see some practical uses, but the past year it's been like scam. BlockFi, dude, I had the BlockFi card paying for everything, all my expenses and earning BTC. And it was like, this is fun. This is an interesting take on credit and on currency. Just being here and trying to operate the like horrific backward fucking banking system of Costa Rica. Like it's amazing. And it's so insecure. The system here, people get hacked all the time. And it's so sad. These people have $10,000 to their name and savings for their entire lives and boom, it's just gone. And the bank has no answer for it. And it's like, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. I see it as an alternative to some of the backwards traditional finance that first worlders don't really need because they have Venmo and they have Cash App and they have all these super secure payment systems that are instant and easy to use. Not everyone in the world has access to those tools. So, nor do they have access to USD.
No, I see your point. I think till the day when a company doesn't use customer money to go gamble with, you got FTX, Gemini, BlockFi, Celsius. They were all stealing customer money. I've lost hope. Like, oh, we're going to bank the unbanked, whatever the fuck that even means.
I can trust now is Bitcoin is because it's a system based on no trust. It was built because they couldn't trust anyone. I've just completely abandoned all of the tokens and all the central DeFi, CeFi BS. I lost a lot of money in Celsius, and I get a couple updates every other month of, we're releasing 40% of funds in this earn account or not earn account or this wallet or that wallet for this coin. I'm just like, this is a fucking shit show. Oh,
I'm sorry.
That's the name.
Sorry, bro.
Machinsky?
Yeah, he's a
oh
shill.
My God. I don't know. I read the whole BTC white paper, and it's just like very much not what Machinsky was supposedly trying to do, if he was even trying to do anything close to what he said he was trying to do. The whole give us your money, let us manage it is such a traditional finance world. It's no different than Chase Bank, Bank of America. Why is this anything close to revolutionary? It's not. And running some scheme to pump and dump it and then using those funds to repay their earn accounts. People like me who were like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm going to earn like 7% or whatever. But I knew what I was getting into. Maybe the 19-year-old didn't, and he got really fucked and used mom's credit card to buy a bunch of coins.
All the more power to the ones who got lucky, but out of that luck, someone lost. Some other jabroni who used his family savings probably lost his family savings. Someone wins in crypto, someone's losing. There's no value created. For someone to win in crypto, some other jabroni has to put money in it. There's no other way to make money in crypto. None of these guys are really building anything.
Chris, when I was at Tico Lingo, the locals would say that the reason to learn Spanish in Costa Rica is because Costa Rican Spanish is essentially a neutral Spanish. I lived in Chile, and a lot of the Spanish words in Chile are not actually even Spanish. They're Mapuche, which is indigenous there. Argentina has a very unique dialect. First off, is that true that Costa Rican Spanish is a neutral Spanish, which maybe would be the equivalent of an Iowa or Ohio accent in the United States? Would you say that's a fair assessment when Ticos say they speak a neutral version of Spanish?
I wouldn't say it's neutral. I think there is still a very Costa Rican accent. The thing about the accent that English speakers are attracted to is that it's very friendly to the English speaker. So there's not a lot of lisp. There's not a lot of gracias like in Spain. There's not a lot of like double R rollings or like, you know, carro. It's like, no, they say carro. They say birra. Also, for good or for worse, a lot of influence from the USA, Costa Rica, which means there's a lot of words that Ticos use that sound like English. Like they'll say Wi-Fi. They'll just say Wi-Fi. They'll say anis, tu anis is like a super slang word used all over the country, used to say cool or like that's awesome or that's sick, bro. Like tu anis mai is like cool, bro. And tu anis is basically just too nice. And that's influence from gringos coming down here in the 70s and 80s and just Ticos hearing them say nice or too nice or demasiado bueno, translating that to too nice. Funny story, this is a side note. My girlfriend, pura tica, 100% Costa Rican. She studied in Chile. She got a master's degree in urban planning in Santiago. Chileans thought that she was a gringa because her Spanish was so gringa. Like the Tico accent is so like, I guess you would call it neutral, but I wouldn't call it an Ohio or Iowa. Like it still is very distinct, but it's just very easily understood by English speakers, by native English speakers, Americans, Canadians, UK, Australia. I train my teachers on this. Speak loudly, open your mouth, show them your tongue, show them their pronunciation. That pronunciation is super easy for us to understand. And also the people are just like friendly as hell. People are just ready and willing to give you a coffee and welcome you into their home and introduce you to the whole family. For good or for worse, like early days, I used to love it. These days, I'm like, I can't do 45 minutes right now. I have to meet your entire family right now, including all the cats and dogs and the babies, the neighbors, and everybody wants to meet me because I'm this like interesting, funny looking guy who comes from Chicago. Oh, we got to meet everybody. And that's a lot of fun. I've been through Chile and Argentina, and I've been down. I was just got back from a trip from Medellin in Colombia. There is a touch of that. I think that's like generically kind of in the Latino culture, but to the degree that Ticos do that, that hospitality, I don't see it everywhere. I don't see it all over Central or South America. That's a uniquely Costa Rican thing. And I think it's an appreciation of the tourism sector here. It's the top third sector throughout Costa Rica. And people appreciate the extranjero. They love the foreigner. And everyone's home is wide open to them. And that's a lot of fun. I think it aids in the Spanish learning adventure, the journey.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. Gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. Now I'm craving to get to Costa Rica at some point and come visit Tico Lingo. And we really, really appreciate you for coming on this evening and sharing your journey with us. Chris, thank you so much.
Of course, guys, come on down. You're welcome whenever. Like I said earlier, I brew my own beer. It's on tap here at the school. So come down. We'll have it hazy.
That's perfect. And I heard you on a previous podcast when the guest asked you, what's the easiest way to find us? And you basically said, just Google Tico Lingo. Is that still the best way to find you?
Literally just Tico Lingo into Google and you'll find every single thing you could ever ask for. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. And we're on WhatsApp. That's an awesome thing that Americans don't use is WhatsApp. You can just type in a number and you're talking to the business owner like right there and then and texting right to the decision maker. But you'll find us, Tico Lingo, right into Google, ticolingo.com. If you want to go right to the URL and check out our website.
Awesome. We'll link all that in the description below to make it easy for those who are looking. And man, you're very awesome. Love your energy. And I hope we can do another podcast in person, perhaps in the school. Thank you again, Chris. And we'll see you next time. And that is it for this episode of El Podcast. And if you're not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing on YouTube. You can also find us on Rumble. Also, find a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. We thank you all for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.